this afternoon's council meeting. Our final item on the council agenda for today is retail cannabis stores in Kitchener. And we have 3 delegations, but I'll turn it over to Mr. Riedman to begin. Mr. Riedman.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic and members of council. I'm here today to provide a brief overview of the retail cannabis stores in Kitchener staff report that's in front of you today. So my presentation will quickly outline the timelines and provincial framework, highlight the benefits of opting in and our cannabis policy that's proposed as Appendix A to the staff report, and touch on the engagement summary and outline staff's recommendations. So as many people are aware, on October 17th, 2018, the federal government legalized cannabis across the country, and at the same time, the province of Ontario amended the Smoke-Free Ontario Act. Between January 7th and January 9th, the province was soliciting expressions of interest for a lottery process to identify up to 25 stores within the province. Between January 11th and as of today, they had evaluated those lotteries and had actually drawn those and released the 7 for our region. And those are published on the website, but we're not sure where the locations are. They're just the business information at this point in time because it's up to council to make their decisions and opt in or opt out before those stores are assigned. And then come April 1st, 2019, private cannabis retail stores are permitted to open in Ontario in municipalities that opt in. So the province is approving 25 stores across Ontario as of April 1st, and 7 of those retail stores will be permitted in the West region, which includes an area from Niagara to Manitoulin Island down to Windsor, exclusive of the GTA and inclusive of Waterloo region. In terms of the framework, the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario is responsible for licensing and regulatory matters, and the AGCO has established standards and requirements for the store operator, the physical retail store, and the retail store manager. Cannabis retail must be treated the same as any other retail, and municipalities are not permitted to create specific zoning requirements within their municipality. The AGCO will provide a 15-day commenting period to the municipality and public, and comments must relate to whether the retail store is in the public interest. Lastly, Council's decision is on whether bricks and mortar stores will be permitted within the City of Kitchener's boundary, and that's the decision for today. The benefits of opting in are that cannabis is now a legal substance in Canada and will be available online or in other municipalities that opt in. In terms of product safety, cannabis products sold through the Ontario Cannabis Store, which is the online retailer, and legal bricks and mortar stores will be federally controlled and inspected. There are economic development and job opportunities, including labeling, product design, marketing, things like that. So there are spin-offs in addition to having bricks and mortar stores. In terms of harm reduction, the provision of a regulated framework allows for less opportunity for the illegal market to operate. And lastly, in terms of provincial funding, there's greater financial support for municipalities that choose to opt in for cannabis retail within their municipalities. The cannabis retail store policy that's attached as Appendix A is structured in a way that aligns with the provincial policy and recommendations, which means that city comments shall be based on the public interest as defined as protecting public health and safety, protecting youth and restricting access to cannabis, preventing illicit activities in relation to cannabis. The proposed City of Kitchener comments are structured in a way to align with the provincial separation distance of 150 meters from schools, and additionally, the City proposes commenting on the following with that same distance separation: addiction services providers, residential shelters and supportive housing for youth and other vulnerable populations, social service providers that support youth or other vulnerable populations, community centers and recreational facilities, libraries, and other cannabis retail stores. Staff have engaged with various stakeholders, including school boards and post-secondary institutions, business improvement areas, fire prevention, and Waterloo Region Police Services, who are here today to speak about the benefits of opting in as well. All of these agencies provided either no opinion or supported opting in to cannabis retail within the City of Kitchener. So before I turn it over to future delegations and then over to Council for questions, just to recap the recommendations that are outlined in the staff report today. The first is that the City of Kitchener opt in to allow retail cannabis stores. And second, that the municipal retail cannabis store policy statement as outlined in Appendix A as attached to this report be adopted. And further, that the manager of site development and customer service or designate be delegated authority to provide written submissions to the registrar under the Cannabis License Act 2018 regarding the issuance of proposed retail cannabis store licenses within the City of Kitchener in accordance with the commenting criteria outlined in the City of Kitchener's Municipal Retail Cannabis Store Policy Statement. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Reedman. There don't appear to be any questions, so we'll go right into the delegations. I'll remind delegations that they have 5 minutes to make their presentations, and we'll start with our police chief, Chief Brian Larkin. Welcome, Chief.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Mayor Verbanovic and members of council. 5 minutes, eh?
Okay, we might give you a little leeway if needed.
That's hello and goodbye. But just before I start, I would like to take an opportunity, joined today by Acting Deputy Chief Shirley Hilton, who oversees our neighborhood policing and investigations, and previously was the superintendent overseeing our intelligence unit, drugs and firearms and organized crime. Would also like to take an opportunity to recognize Mr. Reedman for his collaboration and work with our police service and other municipalities, as we've obviously am here on behalf of the police service to support the staff recommendation for the municipality of the City of Kitchener to opt into retail cannabis stores. And we recognize that this is a polarizing community issue. And I think we also recognize that from a policing perspective, on October 17th, 2018, was one of the greatest pieces of public policy that we've seen in the last century, which was the end and the termination of prohibition on cannabis and moving from a criminalized approach to a legalized approach. And I think you've heard and the reasons why the police service and of course the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police and the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police have been supportive of the federal regulation. The federal regulation was really themed on two principles. One was to change the culture of our country and to ensure that young people are protected from illicit cannabis use. As council may be aware, our country is one of the greatest cannabis users of all nations across the world, particularly for young people between the ages of 12 and 24. The secondary reason was to combat organized and illicit crime. This is a significant amount of monies that are generated by organized crime and obviously fuel other crime opportunities for those that choose to target on vulnerable and prey on the vulnerable. And so, as you alluded to through Mr. Reedman's report, obviously there's a couple of key pieces here, and I also urge council to look towards October 2019 when edibles will also come online, which will also be very different. I mean, we're talking about the cannabis plant right now, but over the next 10 months, government, the province and the federal government will be introducing cannabis legislation that will include edibles, etc. And those stakeholder discussions are ongoing. Safe supply is one of the key reasons. Retail and coordinated stores, which are controlled by the Government of Ontario through privatized sales, will be subject to oversight. We already have a significant regime with the Alcohol and Gaming Commission, and so a legalized approach will ensure that there's oversight not only by the AGCO, but past practice and our past history of positive working relationship with the police service as well as our municipal bylaw staff. And so I think that that's extremely important. There'll obviously be significant monitoring to ensure that they're adhering to similar processes that liquor license control, beer stores, etc. undergo. There's mandatory training for staff. There's mandatory components that will also allow for enforcement as a part of the regulation. One of the key pieces that we're recommending opting in is to combat organized crime and to actually discourage illegal dispensaries. We recognize that the current provincial legislation provides the municipality with limited control of where the stores land. By opting out, you have no control. Illegal dispensaries will be able to pop up and be subject to more enforcement. And the reality is that from a policing perspective, we prioritize our investigations, and of course, our focus right now is on a much larger issue, and that is around the opiate challenges facing our region, right across our region. And so, although we have dealt with about a dozen illegal dispensaries over the last 12 months, We've done that through compliance as well as some criminal charges and investigations. But the reality is that our services are best utilized focusing on other challenges in our community. And hence, with cannabis being legal, creating a controlled and regulated framework in our perspective is the best approach. It will also minimize the impact on policing and allow us to deploy and dedicate resources elsewhere. And I don't think it's any secret to this council that in a couple of coming weeks I'll be speaking to another council seeking additional police resources. And so want to ensure that we use our limited resources appropriately. And so encouraging the City Council to consider the staff report. We have been heavily consultative across the region, across all area municipalities, as well as with our, our partners in the school boards, et cetera, around regulation. And we also recognize and we encourage a key piece of this has to be around prevention, education, and awareness. And so although we're heading to a legalized framework, we should, as stakeholders and as community leaders, ensure that we continue to prevent young people from using illegal substances. So subject to any questions, thank you, Mayor Urbanovic and members of council.
Thank you very much, Chief. We have one question for you right now, and that's Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chief, for coming in. And I think you've given a very good overview, objective of perhaps the benefit of opting in as opposed to not to. And perhaps you can help to answer this. If even the municipality were to opt out, that doesn't prohibit smoking of the cannabis product within the city limits.
No, and so the reality is that the Cannabis Act allows for public consumption. And I want to add that, between October 16th, October 17th, and October 19th of 2018, across the region, everything remained relatively as is every single day. Because the reality is that we know that there's a significant amount of use of illicit cannabis. And so there's nothing preventing anybody now, although we've been really limited. The cannabis introduction and the Cannabis Act has really created limited demand on policing with the exception of road safety. We've obviously ramped up our road safety efforts to ensure that our roads remain safe from impaired by drug, impaired by alcohol. But again, I think we need to recognize that public consumption is something that is legal right now. The Ontario Chiefs are advocating right now, for enhanced regulation around similar to the Tobacco Control Act and smoking in public, etc. But right now, outside of City Hall, there would be nothing prohibiting somebody from consuming lawfully a cannabis cigarette.
And this irrespective of if there's retail chain stores or not. And the other thing is that you've outlined a concern that there be a safe supply as opposed to access to illicit sale of the cannabis product. And would you say that resources would be better placed as for enforcement, ensuring that there is a safe supply options as opposed to people looking and venturing into unsavory options?
Yeah, safe supply is one of the key components and one of the key reasons in the impetus of federal legislation. We have to recognize that the supply, the growth from seed to sale, the Government of Canada, the Province of Ontario has put in place a significant quality control and a significant regime that tracks right from the seed to the final sale. And we have to recognize that in the real world, the street pharmacist, one that sells illicit drugs, is no different than any other pharmacy. They have a multitude of products available, but they don't have the same quality control. They don't have the same impact. They don't have the same knowledge. And so, as we move forward, I think that it's a very difficult thing, even in policing and our internal culture, is recognizing, for many years this was prohibited. And all of a sudden, within 24 hours, we've gone to a different approach. And so even internally, we're changing our minds to those pieces. But the reality is that this is about what people consume. We want to make sure that it's regulated, safe, and obviously a retail store will ensure that.
Thank you for providing that more holistic approach when we see this discussion.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic, and thanks, Chief Larkin, for coming in. One of the questions that I want to ask about is in regards to when you made your decision with your staff and with the police associations and all that stuff. Online sales. How did police services deal with online sales in particular? Because to me, it seems like they were already on there. People were getting the product regardless. So I'm just curious to see on your end how it was dealt with.
So the online sales, obviously, by having that regulated, controlled piece, it ensures, the packaging is controlled. So if we stop somebody and they have it online, they purchase online, it's all obviously registered, et cetera. But I think, one of the pieces that, the Drug Advisory of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, we visited Denver, and one of the key pieces we learned is that, online sales is one perspective. Retail sales allows individuals to actually go in and actually talk to somebody that has knowledge of the product. And so I think where the difference is that if you look at the online sales, there's different potencies, there's different strains, et cetera. It's quite a diversified product. And as we move to edibles, the next iteration is likely some form of bombs, et cetera, oils, et cetera. There's all kinds of different pieces there. And I think that with the retail store, no different than LCBO or a beer store, I guess the consumer could go in and say, I'm looking for something light, I'm looking for something a little stronger, and it sounds ridiculous that the police chief is even talking about this, but that is the reality of the world that we're in. And so there's that balance piece, and not everybody, we have to recognize from a policing perspective is that the online store, although it has done, we believe, has obviously provided significant sales, not everybody has access to a mailing address, not everybody has access to a secure credit card, and so it will not totally eliminate the illegal and the actual gray market, because there'll still be people looking for different options, because not everybody has the means or the ability to go online, use a secure credit card, and have it delivered to an address.
Okay, that's really great. My other question is dealing with, I guess, basically the consistency of the product in general. I'm not sure how the opioid issue that we're dealing with, is that usually mixed in with cannabis, or so maybe there's a sense of quality control. Can you just give me a little better perspective?
Yeah, so locally we've not seen cross-contamination, but the reality is that always exists, and so with the opioid piece, that's the challenge that we see, right, is generally we see, for example, cocaine, which is cut and then cross-contaminated, or actually, fentanyl is added to it to create a different, obviously a greater potency piece. We haven't necessarily seen that. What we've seen locally, the example I'll use is as we look forward, edibles is a good example around packaging, around control, around regulation. We did have a service call where a young person found edibles in the house. Of course, they're young. They believe that they were, a jube, a gummy bear, and the young person was obviously severely ill, transported to the hospital, et cetera. So that's the perspective around regulation, control, education, awareness pieces. But, the safe supply piece is, something for many years is that you don't really know what you're purchasing from the street corner. Regulate it, the retail stores and the online stores ensure that there's a regulation piece. Council may be very well aware that currently the federal government has a recall on government-grown and government-produced cannabis based on finding mold within it. So the same quality assurances, inspection, et cetera, as I said, from seed to sale, is pretty significant under the federal and provincial framework. That will never be seen in the gray market because there's a cost to that. And quite frankly, there's also the value system that is not necessarily there.
Okay, and once again, thank you for appearing today, having the police support, opting in, and having the police chiefs associations and all the other organizations with dealing with police services. Gives me a little bit of solace in accepting all this. Thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. My question is, from your resourcing standpoint, there will be some pros in terms of reducing the sort of the black market element, which I think would lessen the resources, and then there's the whole other side of monitoring it. Where does that balance out? Do you see a net demand in greater resources, or do you see a decrease on the police force?
So there is, I should add that our police service will be receiving or is in the process of receiving provincial funding. We'll have one member assigned to, the province is creating 6 provincial enforcement teams that will be coordinated through the Ontario Provincial Police Service. Their focus will be on organized crime and illegal dispensaries. There'll be a West Region team, and as we know, the geography of West Region is pretty significant. There'll be a team of 7. Will receive full funding, and that team will be responsible for dealing with gray market, continued trafficking. The reality is that as we bring retail stores online, we've not seen, obviously the the online store is doing very well, but we haven't seen dispensaries popping up or receiving complaints as we did pre-legalization. Our position would be that as we move to a legalized framework, and if the municipality opted in, obviously there's business licensing, there's all those processes that come in play, that municipal bylaw actually has powers and should assume the powers. And it would be our perspective that, unless the AGCO ask us to intervene, our focus is on mid-level, high-level drug trafficking. We'll deal with community issues, and I do think that as we roll this out, for example, if the municipality was to opt in and there's a contentious or concern in a neighborhood about the store going in, our community resource officer ought to be dealing and working with the municipality, with the area residents around. It's a change process. Things are changing. No different than the odd time we receive complaints around, liquor retails or beer retail outlets, etc. But our focus has been heavily on road safety. But the reality, Councillor Davey, is we're looking to realign our resources. This is legal, and it's no longer at the top of our investigative priority. Particularly when we have an opiate challenge across the region. That's where our attention needs to be and ought to be.
So there's much greater resources than being provided than the 122,000 that the region's getting.
Pardon me?
There's you're getting much more support from the province than just the 122,000.
Well, we're receiving funding for one person. I wouldn't say that that's, a significant investment.
So that's the base of my question. Do you think the province is kicking in enough money, enough resources to deal with the potential issues?
Well, so it's interesting. I mean, in conversation, obviously with the regional municipality of Waterloo, there'll be money flowing to the upper tier government, and the police service is currently in dialogue right now with the upper tier. The council where I receive monies from around what's that money, what's it purpose for. I want to be very clear. I think our integrated drug strategy serves our community well, but I do think there's more for us as community leaders to do around education, awareness, and prevention, because I do believe we're failing. I don't think we're doing very good at it. And to normalize, retail stores, very similar to, it's the whole morality piece here, right? It's one of these challenge pieces, but I would be remiss as the chief of police if I didn't say I think we got to focus more on building healthy lifestyles. We should ask ourselves as community leaders why a 14-year-old needs to consume cannabis to cope with daily life. I think that if we pause for a second, that should all give us some energy to do good things in our community and to make change for them. Because we know that there are health effects. I want to be very clear about this. Although we're recommending retail stores, this isn't an endorsement of a lifestyle that is filled with addiction or substance use. We don't believe it's healthy. But again, the province, funding one staffing person that is serving a West region, pretty, it's a drop in the bucket, to be very clear.
I appreciate the candid response. Thank you.
Okay, that looks like all the questions we have for you. Thanks so much to both you and Acting Deputy for coming in today. We don't have any clapping in the council chamber. Councillor Johnson, you had a question for staff?
I did, thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, my question is around revenue with these stores. If we do decide to go ahead and have the stores within the city of Kitchener, I understand that within the first 2 weeks of the online stores being up and operating, that there was $42 million in revenue generated. So I'm wondering what, if we do go ahead with the store here, is there any potential revenue coming back to the city?
Mr. Reedman? And I do want to remind everyone that we also have two other delegations from the community that we need to hear from at the end of your questions.
Through the mayor, we have already received confirmation of $122,743 coming to the City of Kitchener. So that's the first installment that's been distributed across all municipalities, whether or not they opt in or not. And then staff understand that a second payment of $15 million will then be distributed across municipalities that opt in. So until the final numbers are in, we can't confirm what that amount would look like. But to be clear, this has to be related to cannabis expenditures from the municipality as well, so we couldn't use it to offset a sewer pipe installation or some other piece of infrastructure.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mayor Verbanovic. The question I have is, and it just conveniently happened to be in our package before this meeting on the weekend, the Ontario Good Roads Association put on an opt-in, opt-out perspective, and actually I agree with most of it, actually, with what they're saying. But the one thing I just wanted to get clarity, and I didn't see it in I don't recall reading it in your report, is the option of opting out. So if we opt out, we don't have and then we decide to opt in, we can't back opt out afterwards, kind of thing.
Through the mayor, so the default is to opt in if no decision is made today. Once a municipality opts in, it cannot opt out afterwards. A municipality could opt out and then opt back in later, but could lose out on some of the funding allocation.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Actually, I'll wait until the other delegations before I ask my
Okay,
questions.
Councillor Michaud.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just with a question with regards to the actual retail stores themselves, this might be something bylaw can answer. Will there be a time frame when they have to be open and closed? Are they going to can they be treated like a bar, or is it the LCBO hours? How will that be framed?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the operating hours are regulated by the provincial government, and it's between 9 a.m. and 11 p.m.
Okay, Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. I just was wondering about in future. So if we opt in now, and there are only 7 stores going to be allocated in this very wide region, but the guess is that we would only maybe have 1 or 2 in Waterloo region at most at this point. But in the future, has the province given any indication as to maximums per municipality?
Yes.
Through you, Chair. The province originally said that they would open up between 500 and 1,000 licenses and then scaled it back to 25. At this point, they have indicated that the 25 will be for the next year and have not indicated how many they'll open up after that.
Okay, so there's no clarity about that.
There's not.
Okay, and then the other question is, for the funds that the province will be allocating to municipalities for bylaw enforcement, will some of those funds be able to be allocated to enforcing smoking of cannabis in locations that are not allowed, or will that be strictly at the regional level?
Through the mayor, at this point, the information we have is that that'll be enforced strictly at the regional level, anything to do with the Smoke Free Ontario Act.
So the bylaw enforcement is just for any potential stores, and that's it? Is that right?
I think the money that we've been allotted is for any training, education, anything to do with preparing for and getting ready for legalization of cannabis.
Okay, thank you.
Just to point out one thing on your question, Councillor Marsh, around numbers, that 500 to 1,000 number is correct. To compare it, there's roughly 500 liquor stores across the province of Ontario right now, probably a little less than that. 600? Okay, so if we go to 1,000, you're talking almost twice the number of liquor stores. So if you think of all the liquor stores in town, it would be almost twice that number potentially of cannabis stores. Okay, our second delegation is Mr. David Schenk. Welcome, Mr. Schenk.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. And I enjoyed the Chief Larkin's comments, which I agree with wholeheartedly. I'm a resident of Waterloo. I used to work over here across the street at Scotia McLeod. Went to Wilfrid Laurier, and I have 2 daughters. One's at Resurrection, and the other one will be there soon. So education of cannabis is priority for me, so much that I did open a medical cannabis clinic last year in Waterloo. I have doctors that prescribe cannabis. We don't sell the product, but we do a lot of education. And I've recently moved on to the retail side. So I now work for a public company out of Vancouver, and we do have interest in this region. But again, because of the lottery, things have changed a bit. We did not win, but we still are focused on the education aspect. So I just want to reiterate that I'm still here, and I'm trying to help the retail side with the education of medical and recreational cannabis. For instance, in our clinic, we've had a lot of elderly patients come in with black market cannabis, oil usually, and they had no idea they were buying it black market because the websites are pretty professional. And there are some drug interactions that they have to be careful of, and they shouldn't have been on some of the cannabis strains that they were recommended or they purchased. And this is where I think we can help out with the education, with youth, with just community in general, that a lot of people will self-medicate. 1 in 4 only come to our clinics, medical clinics. The other 3 think that they're doing it properly online. Indirectly, they get the THC product, and many times they don't need that. CBD obviously doesn't have the psychoactive effect. So I just want to let you know that we're here for education, and if there's anything that you want us to do to help out the community, even if a store doesn't open up here, that's something I'm willing to help with.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate you coming in today. And our last delegation is Mr. Myron Steinman.
Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Steinman.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the cannabis question today. Mayor Vredenbeck, Councillor, I'm going to read this. Councillor Davey, Councillor Schneider, Councillor Gazzola, hopefully I don't butcher the names, Councillor Mashad, Councillor Galloway-Seelank, Councillor Singh, Councillor Leandis, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Marsh. My attention today is to, 1, briefly outline the choice before the City of Kitchener today, as I understand it. 2, I have literature from the United Kingdom, Medical News Today, and it talks about that there is studies of good and bad use of cannabis. It's inconclusive. The studies there's definitely good uses, and there are good bad uses, and it's inconclusive. And this is up to date, 2017, from the United Kingdom. And the third thing is that the criminalization of cannabis was based on information that was fake news. It was incorrect. I would like to read, and then I would like to, I guess I should read my notes here. I didn't have time to time this. Well, I would refer you to an article by opinion article from the Record from December 25th, where she says that all of us would like to see a direction that gives us a little more input to locations, says Kitchener Mayor Barry Varanovich. Waterloo's Mayor Dave Rusty agreed. It's more it shows that she thinks that Waterloo will be targeted because they have a lot of students for cannabis sites. I was going to read this, but I definitely don't have time for that. So now I will read a quote from Emily Murphy. And Emily Murphy was one of the group of 5 women who declared women were people and they got the vote. But she gave fake news about marijuana. She said on her booklet, The Black Candle, and she was quoting a Los Angeles Chief of Police, Charles Jones. She said, "Persons on this narcotic smoke the dry leaves of the plants, which has the effect of driving them completely insane. The addict loses all sense of moral responsibility. Addicts to this drug, while under the influence, are immune to pain and can be severely injured without having any realization of their condition. While in this condition, they become maniacs and are liable to kill or indulge in any form of violence to any person, using the most savage methods of cruelty without, as said before, any sense of moral responsibility." And sociologists call this a construction of moral panic. I'm not a sociologist, but that's what I was told by a sociologist. I would like to see cannabis decriminalized. I would like to see, I missed reading my notes, the third point I was saying, where is it here? The fourth point was, I believe that I would like to go on record that all drug consumption should be decriminalized. All drugs should be decriminalized. I think I said I was a user. The most I've used is, I used to work for a moving company for 3 weeks, and the driver sat beside me here, and the driver sat beside me here, and they both smoked up oil. That's all the illicit drugs I've used. I've drank about 7 beers, and I had 1 puff of a cigar that someone gave me because they were having a baby. But I believe I know what it is like to be high. And so I believe you have till the 22nd to decide this question. So the criminalization of cannabis in the 1920s was based on false information. For the record, I believe no drug consumption should be a criminal offense. There are alternatives to criminal offenses. I am not saying it should not be fined. I am just saying criminalization is not the right method to deal with drug abuse. And in the 1920s, it was based on false information. We know that marijuana people do not use the most savage methods of cruelty without, as said before, any sense of moral responsibility. Thank you. I think I've used up my 5 minutes.
That's okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Steinman, for coming in and sharing your thoughts with us. We appreciate that.
I do have documentation here from the Regional Waterloo on 2017 Enhancing Harm Reduction Services in Waterloo Region, and also the feasibility study of 2018. Okay. And I believe that there should be a focus group for users at the regional level, and that's one thing I'll recommend, is that the users should get a focus group. I don't believe the users, they were able to complete a survey. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate you coming in today.
Thank you.
So, Council, those are all our delegations. You see the recommendation before you in the report. Does someone care to move it? Sorry, Councillor Davey? Oh, questions of staff still? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to touch upon a little bit more about the financing behind this. Our level of government, Kitchener is getting $122,743, and that amount of money is restricted exclusively to dealing with issues stemming from the use of marijuana. Is that correct?
Sorry. Go ahead.
Through the mayor, that is correct.
Okay.
And that's the first installment, and then there's the additional divvying up if we choose to opt in. Otherwise, it's $5,000 for the second installment. And then if the excise tax or excise duty on recreational cannabis over the first 2 years exceeds $100 million, and the province will provide 50% of the surplus to municipalities that have opted in.
Okay, thank you. And that's where I'm going. So, do you know for sure that all future potential proceeds, do they also have to go to dealing with potential marijuana issues? Or is it just the first 122?
Through the mayor, so that is our understanding at this point in time based on the legislation.
Okay, has anyone at the municipal level, AMO or anybody, looked at the potential modeling of how much the province, the federal government, and ultimately the municipality is going to be getting as a result of this new legalization?
Well, maybe I can just briefly touch on that. I mean, that has been an ongoing source of discussion with both the federal government, the previous provincial government, and the current provincial government. The reality is that this is the model the current government has decided to go ahead with, and I think it's fair to say that by virtue of our motion, as well as the ongoing work of AMO, this will be no doubt a ongoing topic of discussion as it becomes apparent what the revenue stream really is, and quite frankly, how it should be shared with municipalities such as us if we opt in.
Okay, so and therein lies my question, because it's not like we're not the first area to do it. I've looked at I'm just trying to model the math a bit myself. If you look at a more mature area like Colorado, which is, I think I would say, directly comparable, the numbers that we're potentially dealing with here are very significant. So I don't understand. I guess the part that confuses me is if we end up getting more money than we can possibly dedicate towards dealing with the issues related to marijuana, how does that work going forward? Like, I just doing a quick straight calculation comparing to Colorado, assuming that our ultimate sales on a per capita basis are similar. You're looking at the excise tax alone, 10% is about $6 million alone for Kitchener in terms of just the excise tax. So if it's looking at the entire province, they're looking at numbers $300 to $400 million, which would be well in excess of the 50% surplus that they're planning to share with us. So I guess my question is, where do we see that potential use going forward? Like, if we're getting significant amounts of dollars that are well beyond the need, how do we allocate that, and how do we advocate for that?
Mr. Reedman, do you want to take a shot at that?
Through the mayor, so I believe Mayor Vrbanovic had indicated, advocacy through AMO and other organizations. Based on the current writing of the legislation, if Kitchener chooses to opt out, we may not be eligible for that money down the road anyway. So if the province were to change the funding allocation and allow us to spend it on other things, there could be a risk if Kitchener opts out now to have access to that funding. But certainly, continued advocacy work could happen through, political channels and different avenues.
But nobody knows then if the municipality is getting a reasonable deal or not. There's no model out there that has any sort of estimate in terms of what we can expect to get over the next 2, 3, 5 years.
Through the mayor, so as I mentioned earlier, it depends on how many municipalities opt in related to that $15 million second payment. And then depending on the federal excise duty, it would result in whether or not we're getting additional money through that.
Okay, this is still very puzzling to me, and because again, it's not a new thing. There are very clear models out there where you should be able to make better estimates. So I'm confused at why everything seems very much like we're not sure what the revenue stream is going to be. When you can look at models that are out there, we should have a very, very good idea of what the revenue stream is going to be from the federal government on down. Anyway, I will move. I'm happy to move the recommendation, Mr. Mayor, and I guess if you don't, I can comment now briefly as well, if you like.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So I'm opting into this. I don't think the amount of money that we're getting, especially from the province, is fair distribution of the wealth at this point. Having said that, opting out would ensure that we do not get any potential overflows. I do recall when the federal government first implemented this, I believe they're only keeping around 25% of the of that 10% excise tax, up to a maximum of $100 million, of which the provinces are getting extra. So this is a very significant windfall for the provinces across the country, especially in Ontario. And I would really like to see some of that money trickle down to the municipal level, not only to deal with the issues that are going to be related to the legalization of cannabis, but also for the other infrastructure and other needs that municipalities have as well. So I will support this, but I wanted to make that caveat that I do think that the province is going to have to share this revenue much more liberally than they're proposing now. And I fully expect that the revenue estimates that we're going to see from this, once these shops are built out, once we're seeing 500 to 1,000 stores in this community, I think we're going to see numbers similar to Colorado, and we should be seeing revenues coming from the province similar to that number as well.
Just to be clear, I don't think you meant 500 to 1,000 stores in this community, but in this province. Just wanted to clarify that before that becomes tomorrow's headline. I know you'd be accurate, Catherine. There's the headline. Councillor Singh. Oh, sorry. I need a seconder first of all. Councillor Marsh. Thank you, Councillor Singh. You're next up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm glad that Councillor Davey went where he did with that, so I have some more questions related to that. But I'll ask first, this is something I had early on met with staff in consulting how we can have greater enforcement around how cannabis is used, not just on our recreational facilities, but also our parks as well, which are a little difficult to enforce, just the open space of it. At that point, I was informed that under the Smoke-Free Ontario Act, the cannabis usage is similar restrictions or allowances. With the monies that are coming, if the City of Kitchener were to opt in, could we or are we going to look at some greater enforcement measures around how cannabis is used in our parks, especially neighborhood parks and district parks?
Just tackling that.
Through the Mayor, I think that'd be something that we would have to have a bigger discussion on. We've been told by the region that if any municipality within the region that comes up with more stringent bylaws other than the SFOA, that we will not be able to use them as our enforcement agencies. So I think that's something that we're going to have to, if we're going to consider, we're going to have to look at what that would look like from a resource standpoint.
But again, the question before us is about opting in, and if you were to opt in, again, users can still go out and buy it from a neighboring city or order online or grow the plant in their own home. By opting in, we will have access to greater funding that will make options available such as this, where we could do internal enforcement as opposed to relying on the region.
So through the Mayor, so we could look at using that money for that if that was something that Council wanted to direct us to look at. I think we would have to do a broader scope and look at exactly how much enforcement we would need and how many officers that would require and whether that money would be sufficient.
I appreciate that. No, I don't look to see you to answer that question today as to how that program would look like, or even if that's a direction that is feasible. I'm sure there would be a community consultation. I just wanted to see that would give us greater options available. The other question I had quickly was related to reporting, and this is to Councillor Davies. benefit. Again, at this point, it's very early as to see what the revenues would be, because it's tough to say what the overall revenues of the province through excitation of tax of the product, what the overall divvy up amount would be. But would we be looking at reporting by the end of this year or anytime soon, so that we can start budgeting more appropriately what the expected surpluses that would be coming back to the City of Kitchener?
Through the mayor, we can certainly circle back with members of council once we know what that second payment installment looks like, and provide an email update. And then I would assume that we would report back on an annual basis through our budget process on any revenue streams through cannabis retail.
And with a second payment, when is that going to be? Because that's already a hard number.
I think some of this is stuff that we don't necessarily know answers to yet, so I'm not sure that,
Well, we do know 15 million. I just wanted to know when that date is that would be decided.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I'm just cognizant that we're getting to a lot of stuff here that's sort of down the road. Not just you, but everybody, to be clear.
Through the mayor, so I don't know if we have a specific date, but it would be after the deadline of January 22nd that we would find more information out from the province.
Okay, all right. And this that answer to my question, Mr. May help to make my comments as well. I think there are significant amounts of money that are on the table. The question before us is not about, not allowing usage altogether in the community. That is not a decision before us. That's not our purview to decide on that. That's already been decided, and that is a law of the land right now, cannabis usage. It's more about, do we allow sale? It doesn't prohibit sale in neighboring cities if they opt in, or again, as I've already said, ordering a line or growing the plant. But if we were to opt out, making more of a principal empty gesture, it does prohibit us of access to significant amounts of money that would be coming down the road. Again, as the retail stores would broaden, I think that would increase sales. At the same time, through taxation split with the municipalities, there's a lot of revenue on hand that we could leverage. And the question I was asking is, and again, it's tough to project exactly what that overall would be in years down the road, depending on usages, but we do know there's 15,000 that's sitting on the table that would be divvied up from the communities that would opt in. So we do have hard monies that are coming on top of the 124,000 that's already available to us if we opt in. And I think we need to start putting our mind to that. I encourage members of council to opt in and not let go of that future benefits as well as immediate benefit of having that funding. Because not only, again, the question before us is not usage, or, I think it is before how do we do proper enforcement, ensuring that there's a safe supply, as well as ensuring that if people are opting to use this product, there are also other positives that are coming to the community through other investments in infrastructure. That's one. But active lifestyle as other. As question of the ultimate health benefit, that's aside the point. But again, if we can leverage those fundings to better the living standard of our community overall, we all win. And if we opt out, we are losing sight of easy money that's on the table right now. So I would encourage to support based on those, and it's not a matter of question of principle.
Councillor Ioannidis.
More along the comments.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Let's get her done.
Thank you, Mayor Vrbanovic. Initially, when this all became a topic and it became legal by the federal government, I wasn't too sure what to think about it. But when I started really doing the research, as the one gentleman who'd come in as a delegation, and it started to make a little more sense to me. And the reality is, it is now legal, so we have to deal with it. And as a municipality, we only have really one option to opt out. So I rather go through a trial phase, and if it doesn't work out, we can opt out. But if we opt, that we only have that one opportunity. And again, the other thing that I started focusing on more was that what was the intention of cannabis in legalizing it? And it was more or less to eliminate the black market. And if we don't opt in, what we're doing is now we're giving individuals, in particular youth, let's say, will have two options: either to travel to the closest town that have legalized cannabis retails, or they're gonna, and if it's too far away, what are they gonna do? They're gonna buy it illegally. And I think that's one of the things that I don't want to see, is, and in particular to the host of other benefits, but if we're having a legal operational storefronts, we are having something that's government regulated, supply is regulated, it will pay sales tax, it will pay property taxes, it will create jobs, and it will restrict sales to youth. And what is the other option? The other option is, if we opt out, we're going to support the thriving black market, which serves organized crime and creates violence, and selling a potential dangerous supply of whatever the cannabis is. We don't know what it is, when we should be concentrating on the opioids. And then hearing about the report and seeing about the funding in general, to me, that is the big windfall for us. If we can get the funding that can help offset any social issues that this may create, but as well and create ancillary revenue for municipalities, is, to me, again, I think is something that was able to make me make my decision easier, but as well, and finally, having the police and the police associations and the police chiefs have their vote of confidence in that also gave me something to look at, and I respect their valued opinions, because that's what they do, and that's what helped me make my decision overall. So I will be supporting opting in.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. I just want to thank our staff for their thorough research, and for the chief and other delegates to come and share their viewpoints on it. We've heard nothing but positive comments towards opting in. As a councillor, I've only heard one resident ask me to not vote in support of opting in, and many who have asked that we do. Some of the key points that really struck me today were about not only the economic factors that many have already really talked about at length, but also the product safety. To think about the unregulated market, the gray market, as we're referring to this decriminalized substance. It's so dangerous to think about the products that are being sold illegally. When we think about the federally controlled cannabis, at least we know that our residents who do decide to opt in personally, they will have access to safer products. But as a mother too of two teenagers at home, I really do appreciate some of the comments that have been made about looking at reducing harm and looking at ways that we can educate to make sure that people with young developing minds are aware of the dangers of opting in too soon. And so I think that would be another factor that we should consider as we move forward to opt in to cannabis retail sales, that we look to send the messages home about safe use and what ages are appropriate, because we have to remember that the youth are not allowed to purchase it until they're 19, and so that's something that we need to hammer home as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So that's all the speakers we have. I'm just going to make a couple brief comments because I think a lot has been said already. I mean, this really boils down to moving from a market that is an illegal black market run by organized crime to one that is run by a safe market that is run by the private sector and regulated by provincial government. This really boils down to focusing on product safety, economic and job opportunities, harm reduction, and the fact that we will be part of the solution in terms of addressing issues in the community and also ensuring that we get the funding that's available to us to address some of the issues that exist in our community. By simply opting out, quite frankly, we don't know if in the future we would get any of those dollars, and we would have no voice at the table in terms of dealing with these issues. So with that, the motion has been moved and seconded. Okay, we'll take a recorded vote on this. And that's carried unanimously. Does somebody want to move the bylaws for 3 readings? Moved by Councillor Ioannidis, seconded by Councillor Galloway-Seelock. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Motion to adjourn council. Councillor Marsh, Councillor Johnston. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And back to finance and admin to finish capital in 3 minutes. And I just want, at the end of finance, I can speak to council for just 3 or 4 minutes about a scheduling issue later in the month that we need to resolve. Thanks.